Hello and welcome to this very special episode for a discussion on the Iran waiver decision taken by the United States after coming out of the Iran nuclear deal, or the JCPOA, almost unilaterally last year in May. America had reimposed sanctions on Iran oil in November last year, but it initially allowed the 8 biggest buyers of Iran oil to continue purchasing from Iran for almost 6 months, but that waiver ends now. And once this decision came out, the Brent crude oil prices went over $75 per barrel, which was the highest in 2019. And now this decision on the waiver that America has taken will probably increase the oil prices world over, but other than that, it will also redefine America's relations with many countries. We will also look at, during this decision, the big game that is being played out in the oil fields. But at the same time, it poses very tough economic and political questions for India. I have with me to discuss this Sunjoy Joshi. Sanjay, I feel that this decision by America wouldn't have come at a worse time for India, because we're in the middle of the national election. The new government is yet to find its feet. And now you have this decision. This government must be upset, the current government, because whichever way it plays it, the American decision, it's open to criticism by the opposition. What do you feel?
Whenever something happens in the oil markets of this nature, see, India gets the hammer and tongs treatment. It's basically caught in a pair of these tongs, pincers. One is oil prices rising, what is already happening. You said they've touched $75 a barrel. The concomitant effect, which is because of the rise in oil prices, is the fall in the rupee.
Yeah.
And the rupee already, has climbed to over 70. So it is caught in this pincer, and then the result is that every investor then starts hammering the Indian market, whether it be the India's bond market, whether it be India's share market, India's equity market. Investors start running and fleeing because India's fiscal deficit gets threatened by, if you look at the numbers, every variation of $1 in the price of oil or 1 rupee in the price of the dollar in the exchange rate affects India's fiscal deficit by as much as 850 crores. It's a huge impact annually. So India's fiscal mass goes for a complete 6. And during an election time, you are in a situation where this government, which actually had liberalized petroproduct prices, because of the elections, has now been holding back companies from raising oil prices. So oil marketing companies are getting it on the chin. The government cannot react to the rise in prices because they're scared of what effect it will have on the consumers. So those prices have been put on hold. So one, the Indian economy will suffer, definitely suffer. More importantly, India at this point of time is not in a position to send out any clear signals as to what is going to be its stand vis-a-vis the American decision to not grant a waiver.
Do you think India has many options but to comply, even though grudgingly? Does it have options? Because it doesn't really make sense to spoil the bigger relationship.
As far as that is not the situation just with India, the situation the world over, and I'll tell you why that is the state. But the point is that as this decision came, countries like not just China and Turkey, even Europe has come out and said, sorry, we stand with the JCPOA. America's decisions are unilateral, they are damaging long-term relationships, and we support the nuclear deal. We will continue to support it in whatever way we can. They've definitely come out and said, no, these sanctions are not right. India, on the other hand, is not at the moment in the position to even take that kind of a stance because it has been negotiating with the United States regarding its problems across the border, the whole issue of getting someone classified as a terrorist. Getting US to give it support on getting China on board. So all these are calculations which are playing into the game. So India has not taken a firm stand on this at the moment, which by the way upsets Iran and also spoils India's long-term relationship with Iran, where Iran is an extremely critical country geopolitically for India from the larger perspective. It is geopolitically so important that even the United States, when it said no to waivers, still kept Chabahar out of the larger context of these sanctions. It has allowed India to go on investing in Chabahar and said Chabahar projects are going to be out of the realm of these sanctions.
For Chabahar, we'll still have to wait and see till May 2 whether it will still be out of this.
No, Chabahar, America has already said it is out.
It is.
These sanctions do not cover Chabahar because they are part of a larger geopolitical strategy.
Yeah. To kind of rein in China.
To rein in China.
Yeah, but when you say with India is not in a position and so is China, but China is also making noises right now of how they will continue with a normal trade relationship with Iran because China is the biggest buyer of Iran oil. Do you think it's just a bluster or China can do something really and not really comply to the sanction, America's decision?
See, let us understand how the oil market operates to really get an answer to that. See, the oil market was actually the first globalized commodity market, and the oil trade has always been globalized. The world discovered globalization much later, but the oil trade had globalized the world, the 20th century world, much before anything else, before the internet came onto the scene, before the linked banking systems came onto the scene, and that was done through the instrument of the dollar. So the dollar became the preferred currency.
Yeah.
Oil prices are dollar denominated, oil exchanges trade freely across in dollar terms, and it is not just the oil sales and oil trade. And down the value chain, from production right down to refining, everywhere it is a seamless integrated market which operates with various kind of hedges, but that is what operates. Now in this kind of a market where the dollar completely dominates trade, and the US banking system today is enmeshed completely into this business through not just, it is not just a matter of oil trade, insurance, reinsurance, the banking payment channels, everything is somewhere connected to the US. Now sanctions impact all of that. Sanctions even impact the fact who are you going to be selling your petroleum products to. So if you are selling your petroleum products to any country or to USA, then the US government can crack down on any company doing that business, which also means that there are very few companies. So how do you build an alternate payment system, an alternate shipping system, an alternate banking system, an alternate insurance system, which can be firewalled from the US dollar? You cannot do it overnight. That is going to take time. Now Europe has tried to do it. 3 countries in Europe, not the EU, 3 countries in Europe created the INSTEX, which is France, Germany and the United Kingdom. The INSTEX has been placed in position, but it is really yet to be operationalized in any meaningful way, because ultimately it is companies who are going to do the buying and selling and the trading, and companies have links to US. They do not want to come under the purport of the sanctions. That is also true of Chinese companies. There may be a very few limited Chinese state refiners who can say we are completely firewalled from the US, but even they are not firewalled, who will hesitate to get into any relationship which bypasses this. So creating an alternate system is going to take time. And it really means the de-dollarization of the oil trade. That is not going to happen in 1 year, that is not going to happen in 2 years, it's going to take some time. But the fact is that the first shots have been fired. Over time, if you frankly ask me, even Iran today, whatever else it may say, is actually looking, it's exercising some kind of patience, if you say strategic patience. It is saying, let us see whether this phase in US belligerence is a passing phase. Let us see if Trump is an aberration. 2020 things change. So China is also looking at that. Europe is also looking at that. So they are not really moving ahead with full force on these. They're still waiting for what is going to happen in 2020. So it is still going to be wait and watch till 2020. After that, then things, but the first seeds have been planted. Over time, countries are going to start hedging and saying, how do we now deal with global trade? Do we start thinking of alternate mechanisms?
Yeah, you just said that de-dollarization is a challenge of the oil trade, but right now you said the seeds have been planted. I was just reading that Iran's foreign minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has suggested setting up a financial mechanism with Turkey to circumvent the US sanctions. Will that be possible because they share the border and they can do it in terms of barter or physical exchange and avoid the dollar?
See, not just Turkey. The fact is that any country who can buy Iranian oil legitimately or illegitimately is going to buy Iranian oil for some very simple reasons. Because Iranian oil is heavy oil. Most heavy oil today has been lifted out of the market. Heavy oil was either Venezuelan crude oil. Venezuelan crude oil also, because of American actions, has just completely gone off the radar. So what is left is Iranian production. Now that is extremely good oil for middle distillates. That is the best oil. Then there are huge discounts available. Iranian oil trades at a discount. So any sheer commerce dictates, sheer commerce, that any company which can buy Iranian oil will buy Iranian oil. If it can bypass either legitimately the American sanctions which have been imposed, which everyone is saying are illegitimate, illegal sanctions, they are going to do it. But they do not want to get caught in the system, in the dollar system, where they suffer graver commercial consequences. So the US is, at one time, if you look at it this way, from being the class monitor, the US today has become the class bully. No, it was imposing. It was imposing sanctions under a multilateral system. Those sanctions had a different standing. Today, the sanctions which are being imposed are the sanctions being imposed by the class bully. Now, there is going to be rebellion. No, from tiny Tommy Tin living in Trinidad and Tobago to the big John Stouts living in Beijing and Moscow, they are going to have problems. There is going to be a pushback, and you are seeing this pushback happening.
But America has been using sanctions as a tool of its foreign policy. Like you said, it's become the class bully, and the countries can't escape this sanction. So right now, you're saying anyone and everyone who can buy the Iranian oil, legitimately or illegitimately, will do that. But do you see that Iranian oil, when the sanctions are in place, Saudi Arabia, UAE, these countries can fill in, and the supply can be maintained, but you're saying there can't be replacement for the Iranian oil?
See, as far as quantities go, oil is a freely traded commodity. So as far as the quantity of crude goes, there are no problems. There will not be a shortage of oil.
America will also ensure that.
Yeah, there is enough production. There is no shortage of oil. Production can be ramped up. Prices will rise. That is what is going to happen. Prices will rise. They're rising also because of Venezuela. They're also rising because of trouble in Libya.
Yes.
If there is suddenly you say there is some incident in the Straits of Hormuz, which Iran keeps on threatening. I don't think they will do anything. But supposing there were to be a terrorist incident in the Straits of Hormuz, someone takes advantage of the situation and creates a terrorist incident there. So immediately you will see a further rise in oil prices. So the geopolitical risk of high oil prices and configurations resulting from unintended consequences as a result of these actions becomes extremely severe.
And if we look at Turkey and Iran and their relationship, Iran and Turkey have grown closer. Also because the whole journalist Khashoggi being killed there, all of that happened. Now the dependence between Iran and Turkey, the relationship has improved. So do you see that shift also, the close diplomatic relations or political relations also playing out in the way Turkey will deal with Iran or take a stand against America?
See, the interesting reconfigurations happening in global politics. One is precisely what you mentioned. There is third power in West Asia emerging, which is Turkey. And yes, Iran and Turkey are having a closer relationship. Relationships between Turkey and the US are strained. Between Turkey and Saudi Arabia are strained. Iran keeps on accusing, Javad Zarif has openly accused Bolton of playing, he's not accused Trump, he's accused Bolton of playing the Saudi Arabian agenda and not really taking a neutral stance in this whole dispute. Then you see Russia and China. So there is a kind of nexus now developing where Russia, China, Turkey, Iran are coalescing onto one side of this game. Europe, as far as West Europe is concerned, is not too happy with American actions on this front. West Europe's trade in oil, a large part of its trade can be non-dollar denominated because the countries it imports from are not Gulf countries. It is so largely dependent on Russia for both its oil and its gas. So large part of its energy trade can be non-dollar denominated. So euro is going to be the big player in the future if Europe really takes a stand on this. But the situation for East Europe is different. East Europe does not want to play ball with Russia. They want to be independent. They want to swing closer to the US. So they are quietly trying to get in US gas, US LNG, trying to diversify the trade more and more towards West Asia and Africa, which is again dollar denominated trade. So there is very interesting tussle and reshaping of alliances which we are going to see shape before our eyes. And as I said, a lot is going to depend on what does America remain after 2020. Does it become the class monitor again and things change, or it remains a class bully?
But, just a last question because we're running out of time. When we look at the current decision by the US to end the waiver on the sanctions, how do you see it playing out right now, in short, vis-a-vis India, Europe, and China? Will they all, will they find ways to circumvent the sanctions? Is it possible for them? What will be the immediate effect? The oil prices is one.
See, the offtake will definitely reduce.
Yeah.
The US will succeed in its intentions in the short run and the medium run. In March, Iran sold about, post waivers, about 1.7 million barrels of oil a day. Those are expected to come down to about 500,000. Now, who gets how much of that 500,000? Mind you, there's also going to be a lot of illegitimate trade taking place, by concealing point of origin, by ships switching off transponders and doing some trade somewhere else. So there'll be a lot of policing of that also going on. That policing may also lead to some conflagrations, some confrontations. So we are heading into rather dangerous waters there. But trade will not become zero. You can still expect 500,000 to 1 million barrels of oil will still be traded. Who gets how much will depend on the circumstances as to how much trade legitimately they can do through alternate mechanisms. That is the game which is going to be played.
And by the time that all this plays out, 23rd May will be here and our new government will be in place, and probably domestic oil prices will again, they will be in a position to raise the oil prices then.
Well, let us see what happens, because yes, India, as I said, is going to be caught in this, as the new government is going to be caught in this game right bang in the middle, this hammer and tongs approach, getting beaten down by what is happening in the oil markets.
Absolutely, and given the centrality of India in America's Indo-Pacific strategy, it was, we were probably, or India was hoping that they will get another exemption, but that did not happen. It doesn't seem to happen. Thank you so much, Sanjoy, for this conversation.